The Gloster Gladiator was a British-built biplane fighter designed and produced by the Gloster Aircraft Company to replace the aging Gloster Gauntlet. It was the first aircraft of its type in the RAF, with a fully enclosed cockpit with a sliding canopy, and would be its last biplane fighter, intended to fill the gap before the Hawker Hurricane monoplane was introduced into service in December 1937. The Gladiator conducted its maiden flight on the 12th of September 1934, going on to see action in almost all theatres during the Second World War. And despite being nominally outdated and obsolete from its outset, the Gladiator would acquit itself with aplomb. Interestingly, in the early 30s, despite some understanding the need to modernize, there was still an institutional preference for biplanes within the British Air Ministry. While development on the monoplane fighters, which we now know as the Hawker Hurricane and Supermarine Spitfire, was underway, skepticism within the ministry on deliverable timeframes led to the release of specification F730. This new aircraft would be capable of a maximum speed of at least 250 miles per hour, an armament of no fewer than 4 machine guns, and be suitable for both day and night squadrons. True to form of picking winners, the Air Ministry highly suggested the use of the new Rolls-Royce Goshawk evaporatively cooled inline engine. However, the Gladiator's designer was engineer Henry Philip Folland, who had wisely advised Gloster to steer clear of the Goshawk and instead worked on a private venture, upgrading its already successful Gauntlet biplane fighter. The gamble paid off. The Goshawk, designed to use steam cooling, proved ultimately unsuitable, being cancelled after only 20 engines were built. Quite unfortunate for the Gladiator's competitors, as they had to contend with the Goshawk under the auspices of the ministry. Folland took several steps to modify the Gauntlet craft to meet the specifications. Firstly, he transplanted the Jupiter for the highly successful Mercury engine. This shortened its stroke by an inch, which reduced the engine's circumference and consequently its frontal area drag. Although this modification resulted in slightly less power, Bristol compensated by taking an unconventional approach. Typically, supercharged aircraft engines use their blowers to maintain sea-level power as altitude increases. However, Bristol decided to enhance the Mercury's power by ground boosting it, tuning the supercharger to provide additional power even at sea level. Additionally, the Mercury engine featured 4 valves per cylinder, an uncommon characteristic for a radial engine. Folland then turned his attention to speed via reduction of drag. He reinforced the main spars and altered the biplane configuration from a 2-bay design, featuring 2 sets of interplane struts on each side of the fuselage, to a single-bay configuration, removing 4 large struts along with their extensive cables and rigging, significantly streamlining the aircraft. Additionally, the simplification of the landing gear further reduced drag. The straightforward steerman-like Doughty dampers, enclosed in sleekly faired wooden legs, provided a much cleaner design compared to the multi-strutted landing gear of the Gauntlet. Another drag-reducing feature was a fully enclosed cockpit with a sliding canopy, the first of its kind on any RAF fighter. However, many photographs of Gladiators in flight show the canopy slid wide open. Experienced RAF pilots felt constrained by the canopy. They argued that it limited their visibility and disconnected them from their proper environment. Moreover, the cockpit often filled with engine fumes, necessitating ventilation. The canopy was not the only innovation on the Gladiator that met with resistance. It was also the first British fighter to use flaps, intended solely for landing. These flaps were small but deployed from both sets of wings, providing a significant total area. Many veteran pilots refused to use them, claiming they disrupted the airplane's trim, despite there being a pitch trim wheel available. The first Gladiator prototype, SS-37, flew on the 12th of September 1934. Quickly dumping its 530 horsepower Mercury 4 engine for the more powerful 645 Mercury 6S engine, it achieved a top speed of 242 miles per hour, sneaking above the specification of 240. And it did so fully armed, with two Vickers 303 machine guns in the fuselage and two 303 Lewis guns under the lower wing. Arguably, due to resistance in the Air Ministry around radial engines, the transfer of the SS-37 to the RAF didn't occur until 6 months and 3 weeks later, on the 3rd of April 1935, and 2 months after that before an initial order for 23 of the aircraft, now formally named the Gladiator, was made in July 1935. The final production model had a length of 27 feet and 5 inches, a height of 11 feet, 9 inches, a wingspan of 32 feet and 3 inches, and a total wing area of 323 square feet. Its maximum speed was 253 miles per hour. Cruising at 210 miles per hour for approximately 2 hours, its service ceiling was 32,800 feet, reaching 10,000 feet in 4 minutes 45 seconds. It was armed with 2 synchronized 303 Vickers machine guns mounted on the fuselage and a further 2 303 Lewis machine guns, one beneath each lower wing. It is of note that the Gladiator's career was too short to allow for many variants to be developed, so there were only 3 near-identical versions of the airplane. The original Mark I had a fat 2-blade, fixed-pitch wooden prop, while the Mark II received a more efficient 3-blade metal prop, plus its machine guns were replaced by the more reliable Browning 303 machine guns, manufactured by the BSA Company in Birmingham. At the time, the Royal Navy found itself without a fleet defence fighter, so it got 98 Sea Gladiators. It had a strengthened tail cone and A-frame arrestor hook, and a pod holding an inflatable raft on its belly. There is also speculation that some Sea Gladiators fitted a further pair of Brownings under the upper wings as well, bringing the total to 6. But this may just be part of the mythos that arose around the Gladiator in its defence of Malta. More on that later. Manufacturing of the Gladiator was at Gloster's Hucklecote facility in Gloucestershire and took yet another 1 year and 7 months, with the delivery of the first production Gladiator, K6129, on the 16th of February 1937. During this period, the Air Ministry, concerned about the readiness of its next-generation fighters due to difficulties with the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, decided to procure 300 of the Mark II Gladiators. This panicked move was later reduced to 252 planes being delivered in April 1940. But it wasn't just the RAF interested. In total, 17 nations ordered the Gladiator, including forces that would ultimately be in the Axis alliance. The Gladiator's wartime career in World War II was necessarily brief and, despite some myth-making, largely ineffectual. But its wartime career predates World War II. In October 1937, the Chinese central government procured 36 Gladiator Is to use in its war with Japan. Re-kitted with American 1919 Browning machine guns chambered to fire American .30-06 Springfield ammunition. It was with the Chinese on the 24th of February 1938 that the Gladiator had its combat debut, culminating in the shooting down of a Mitsubishi A-5M Claude by American Captain John Buffalo Wong. China also gifted the Gladiator its first ace, Arthur Tien-Chin, who was also a member of the first group of U.S. volunteer combat aviators to join China in the Second Sino-Japanese War. In turn, the Gladiator gave America its first fighter ace of World War II, the same man. Although sadly not until 1997, when the U.S. government recognized Chin as an American veteran by awarding him the Distinguished Flying Cross and Air Medal, inducting him into the Hall of Fame of the American Air Power Heritage Museum in Midland, Texas, as the first American ace of World War II. as is its lot as a dating biplane. When newer Japanese aircraft, such as the Mitsubishi A6M0, entered the theatre, the Gladiators were massively outclassed and relegated to training duties. To understand how Finland, eventually a member of the Axis alliance, got its hands on 30 Mark II fighters from the UK in February 1940, one needs to understand the history surrounding the Winter War. On the 30th of November 1939, the Soviet Union attacked Finland under a false flag pretext. The attack was denounced by the League of Nations, and as a result, the Soviet Union was expelled from that body on the 14th of December of that year. The Finnish Air Force, supplemented by the Swedish Voluntary Air Force, who also contributed 12 Gladiator Mark II fighters, fared well in the Winter War, with 45 aerial victories by 22 pilots with the Gladiators. But by the time of the Continuation War in 1941, Finland had already turned to Nazi Germany for military support and alliance against the Soviets, thus were now a minor member of the Axis Pact of Steel. But now, outclassed by the more modern Soviet fighters, Gladiator aircraft were mostly used for reconnaissance. Regardless, on the 15th of February 1943, First Lieutenant Håkan Stromberg spotted a Soviet Polikarpov R-5 taking off. Stromberg, seizing on the opportunity, dove upon it, shooting it down in what was to be the last confirmed victory by the Gladiator. With the initiation of the phony war by France on Germany, Britain deployed 2 Gladiator squadrons, following Germany storming into southwest Netherlands, Belgium, and northern France. At the commencement of the Manstein Plan on the 10th of May 1940, the Brits Gladiators participated in the unsuccessful counterattack on German forces. To say they were quickly overwhelmed is a gross understatement, and to add further injury, a Luftwaffe bombing raid destroyed many of the Gladiators on the ground at Vitry-en-Artois before the British evacuated at Dunkirk. But the British were not alone. The Belgians, who fielded 15 Gladiators, suffered all aircraft lost to the Germans, while only managing to damage 2 German aircraft. On the 9th of April 1940, the first day of the invasion of Norway, the Norwegian Jagervingen found itself fighting in the defense of Oslo, while fielding only 7 Gladiators based at Fornebu Airport. Amazingly, they managed to shoot down 5 German aircraft, 2 Messerschmitt Bf-110s, 2 He-111 bombers, and a Ju-52 transport filled with German paratroopers, before one was shot down, 2 destroyed while refueling, and the surviving 4 Gladiator pilots ordered to land elsewhere and seek safety. Anticipating the invasion of Norway, the Air Ministry flew 2 6-3 Squadron equipped with Gladiators to Norway from the carrier HMS Glorious to help blunt the German invasion, surprising the Germans by landing on a frozen lake in the country's center. The Gladiators arrived without support personnel, and the pilots found themselves rearming and refueling their airplanes themselves in the bitter cold, often using milk cans supplied by local farmers for the fuel. Unfortunately, the Luftwaffe reacted quickly with bombing raids, and the lake, already thawing in the spring weather, became increasingly softened and unstable. After less than a week, all the squadron's aircraft were destroyed or unserviceable, sunk into the boggy water, and the personnel were evacuated to Britain. However, in May, the squadron received another 18 Gladiators and returned to Norway, this time to an established airfield near Narvik, and reinforced by Hurricanes of 46 Squadron. They scored several victories over Heinkel 111s, and possibly even a Junkers Ju-88. Ultimately, what remained of the squadron flew back to the Glorious on the 2nd of June to undertake Operation Alphabet, the evacuation from Norway. Soon after the carrier sailed, the battleships Schönhorst and Gneisenau sank it, and all but 2 of the Gladiator pilots aboard perished. Thus ended the Gladiator's Norwegian adventure. In the Battle of Britain itself, the Gladiator, although in operational service, was kept out of combat sorties. Despite that, Squadron 247 on the 25th of September 1940, faced a force of 24 Dornier Do-17 bombers escorted by 12 Messerschmitt Bf-110s attacking the port of Plymouth. The Gladiator proved too slow and ineffectual to attack the force, and the raid was eventually broken up by hurricanes from Exeter. Just 3 months later, the 247 was re-equipped with the Hawker Hurricane. 804 Naval Air Squadron did equip the Gladiator on HMS Furious, operating with RAF Fighter Command at the start of the Battle of Britain, but was swiftly re-equipped with Martlet I fighters. Faith, Hope and Charity. A myth that 3 aircraft, named Faith, Hope and Charity, formed the entire fighter cover of the island of Malta during its siege, was a marvelous mix of propaganda and Christian faith propagated by the Times of Malta, edited by Mabel Strickland. Indeed, on the 10th of June 1940, when the air battle for Malta began, their air defense consisted of just 4 Sea Gladiator Mark I aircraft, 2 of which maintained a continuous standby during daylight hours. Several crates of unconstructed Sea Gladiators were also present, confusing the total numbers, par for the course in such mythic tales. But it is true that it was the Sea Gladiator alone in the skies of Malta until the end of June, when just 5 Hawker Hurricanes were ferried to Malta via France and Tunis to reinforce them. The fall of France and the British shoring up protection of the British Isles saw the delay of 12 more hurricanes until August 1940. So when 10 Cant Z Kingfisher bombers of the Regia Aeronautica attacked the port of Valletta and Hal Far, Strickland wrote, "The Italians decided they didn't like the Gladiators and AA guns, so they dropped their bombs 19 miles off Malta and went back." Well, not quite, but the Italian Air Force units deployed against Malta should have easily defeated the Gladiators. But its maneuverability and good tactics won several engagements. It would often climb at full throttle and superchargers set to max. Starting with a dive on Savoia Marchetti SM-79 Sparviero bombers before the Fiat CR-42 Falcos and Macchi MC-200 escort fighters could react. Charity was shot down on the 29th of July 1940, and its pilot, Flying Officer P.W. Hartley, was badly burned. Hope was destroyed in an air raid on the 4th of February 1941, but Faith survived the war, now residing in the National War Museum in the city of Valletta, Malta. And as a lovely homage, in 1988, 3 of the fighters flown by No. 1 435 Flight RAF in the Falkland Islands were named Faith, Hope and Charity, a nod to its former role during World War II on Malta, equipped with Hawker Hurricane fighters. The Gladiator now deployed further eastward into the Mediterranean, locking horns with the Italians in North Africa, East Africa and Greece. It could be said the Gladiator's most evenly matched rival was the Fiat CR-42 Falco sesquiplane. First locking horns in the battle for Malta, in North Africa that rivalry would ramp up significantly. The Falco was about 15 miles per hour faster than the Gladiator, but it in turn was more maneuverable than the Italian fighter, particularly in a turning fight. The Gladiator's biggest advantage was that it carried a radio with about 5 miles of air-to-air range, allowing coordinated attacks, while the Italian pilots could only gesture and nod their heads. Particularly handy in large-scale engagements, like when a mixed force of 28 Gladiators and Hurricanes encountered roughly 50 Italian aircraft on the Albanian border with Greece on the 28th of February 1941. In the wash-up, Gladiators had a 1.2-to-1 victory ratio over CR-42s during the African campaign, much the same as the ME-109's advantage over the Spitfire during the Battle of Britain, in other words, close enough to call it even. But they were no match for the modern aircraft of the Luftwaffe. So when, on the 5th of April 1941, German forces invaded Greece, they quickly established air superiority. As the Allied troops retreated Gladiators covered them before flying to Crete during the last week of April. Then again, outclassed by the Germans during the Battle of Crete, Gladiators were evacuated to Egypt. During the Anglo-Iraqi War in May 1941, revolutionary Iraqi government forces now controlled the 7 Gloster Gladiators at Rashid Air Base, while British forces held up in the British RAF base at Habaniya. It wasn't much of a base, though, housing the 4th Service Training School and having just 3 Gladiator aircraft. But with tensions rising quickly, the RAF had bolstered that number to 18 by the 17th of May. It was in this conflict that the sole gladiator-on-gladiator kill occurred, when Pilot Officer Watson of the fighter flight shot down an Iraqi Gladiator over Bakuba during a bomber escort mission on the 5th of May. The Germans and Italians reinforced Iraqi forces. Germany formed the Fliegerführer Iraq, translated as Flyer Command Iraq, which from the 14th of May operated out of Mosul. The Italians, Regia Aeronautica, dispatched a force of 12 Fiat CR-42s that arrived on the 23rd of May. Before the British starved the Axis forces out with aggressive supply line raids, the Gladiators acquitted themselves well, matching their Italian CR-42 rivals in a singular dogfight just 6 days after their arrival. And 2 Gladiators shot down a pair of Bf-110s over Rashid Airfield at Baghdad on the 17th of May. Pressing their advantage, the British invaded Vichy French-controlled Syria to prevent the area from falling under direct German control. The month-long Syria-Lebanon Campaign in June 1941 saw heavy fighting both in the air and on land until the Vichy French authorities in Syria surrendered on the 12th of July 1941. It was here 6 Gladiators encountered an equal number of Vichy D-520 fighter aircraft. In what should have been a one-sided battle, both sides lost 1 aircraft shot down and 1 severely damaged. No mean feat. The D-520 was no slouch, often compared to the Bf-109 in terms of performance. Maybe there is more than just mythos behind this Gloster Gladiator. The Gladiator was flown by many great pilots who, no doubt, added pages to the Gladiator mythos. None more so than Marmaduke Thomas St. John Pattle. A gifted flyer and natural marksman, Marmaduke Pattle, better known as Pat Pattle, is considered to be the highest-scoring ace with a Gladiator. Indeed, during his service, particularly in the North African and Greek campaigns, South African-born Pattle is credited with 15 confirmed kills while piloting the Gladiator. This significant number of aerial victories made him the highest-scoring RAF biplane ace of World War II, and after switching to a Hurricane, became the highest-scoring British Commonwealth pilot of the war. Apart from Pattle, 9 more men achieved ace status in the cockpit of the Gladiator. William Cherry Vale, who achieved 10 individual kills, 1 shared kill, and 1.5 aircraft damaged while flying the Gladiator, particularly in the East African Campaign. Flight Lieutenant Joe P. Fraser scored 9.5 kills with the Gladiator, flying with RAF 112 Squadron. Flight Sergeant Don S. Gregory, who achieved 8 kills, flying the Gladiator with 33 and 80 squadrons. Sergeant C.E. Casbolt downed 7.5 enemy aircraft, with 1 probable and 1.5 damaged, while flying the Gladiator with 80 squadron. Caesar Hull, a Rhodesian pilot, scored 5 of his 8 victories in a Gladiator during the Norwegian campaign in 1940, including 4 in one afternoon, earning him the Distinguished Flying Cross. Captain Paavo Berg, the top Finnish Gladiator ace, Berg claimed 6 of his 11 victories with the Gladiator during the Winter War, and Warrant Officer Oiva Tuominen of the Finnish Air Force, who claimed 5 of his 44 victories with Gladiators. And not forgetting Americans John Wong and Arthur Chin, previously mentioned. Not bad for this cranky and archaic, yet iconic and innovative fighter. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment and press the like button. If you would like to watch more like this, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notify button.